Hello and welcome to Diabetes Connections in the News. I'm Stacey Sims, and these are the top diabetes stories and headlines of the past 7 days. If you're new, we go live on social media first, and then all sources are linked up at diabetes-connections.com when this airs as a podcast. Are you looking to get organized? Check out my new guide with top tips to clear your diabetes clutter. Everything from how to start to where to donate what you don't need and how to keep it all from taking over your house. Head over to the homepage to get organized. Our top story this week, moving forward to find a daily therapy to slow or prevent low blood glucose in people with type 1. This is from diabetes-focused life sciences company Zuccara Therapeutics. They're calling the drug ZT01, and in theory, it could restore the body's ability to release glucagon. Long way to go here. But reducing hypoglycemia is obviously a great outcome due to the many risks lows can create. Zuccara will now move ahead with its proof of concept clinical trial in people with T1D. The company expects to publish the findings from that study closer to the summer. Part of the 2021 National Defense Authorization Act means a close look at type 1 in the VA. It mandates a report specifically on disability compensation claims submitted by Vietnam War veterans who have type 1 and were exposed to an herbicide agent during their service. Now, the VA recognizes that Vietnam veterans' type 2 diabetes can be related to Agent Orange, that's the herbicide they're talking about, but it requires veterans with type 1 to provide evidence. There are some challenges here. The VA's claims decision data only goes back to 2003, and they track type 1 and type 2 diabetes with the same diagnostic code. They don't distinguish between the two conditions. In 2020, diabetes represented roughly 6.5% of all service-related conditions for which Vietnam War-era veterans received compensation. A new study of gestational diabetes shows it recurs for nearly half of women who've had it before. These doctors say little is known about the risk factors for recurrent gestational diabetes. Part of the problem is they just changed the criteria for diagnosing it. We reported on that a couple of weeks ago. In this study, about 8% of women had a history of gestational diabetes. Of those, almost 50% had it recur, and just over 7% developed type 1 or type 2 between their pregnancy. Well, what is the link between weed and a lower risk of type 2? First, this study only showed such a link in women, not in men, and only in heavy users. And in this study, heavy use means using cannabis at least 4 times in the previous month. No differences in the prevalence of type 2 in men who were light or heavy users versus non users. These findings come from a large 5-year study that ended in 2018 and in which people self reported their use. These researchers say the gender difference was also seen in animal models. You can expect a lot more study on this one. More good outcomes with SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP-1 receptor agonists. These drugs are a mouthful, but new research links them with lower chances of potentially fatal heart problems in people with type 2 without established heart disease. They compared the newer meds to the risks in people using more traditional therapies like metformin, and the researchers showed the odds of developing heart failure 51% lower for people using SGLT2 inhibitors and the newer drugs. It was 18% lower for GLP-1 users and 57% lower for people using both drugs. The newer drugs, though, are prescribed less, and these researchers say we need to look at why when the newer ones show better outcomes. Some tough numbers about depression and diabetes. In the US, about 30% of people with either type 1 or type 2 have depressive symptoms, and 11% show signs of major depressive disorder. This lines up with studies from other countries as well, so it's not just about healthcare. There is some info in this study about how insulin resistance may go hand in hand with depression. Women with diabetes seem to be at heightened risk. Emerging research suggests treatment of depression with antidepressants may decrease the risk of developing diabetes-related complications, although other research suggests there may be complications related to their use. These conflicting findings highlight the need for further research. Our friends over at Diabetes Mind have a good write-up about the very attractive and ever elusive state of non-invasive blood glucose monitoring. One that caught my eye was Scanbo. This technology uses a 60-second non-invasive finger measurement instead of a traditional blood drop required to measure glucose. The company has developed a prototype. You can see here, you just put your fingers in the flat white sensors, and the system uses a set of algorithms to analyze and offer insight on glucose values. Like most of these we've reported on, they present at consumer shows, not medical conferences, no clinical trials. And this is my editorial. What a weird photo, right? It looks like you have to put both hands on the machine and then that chipped purple nail polish. I mean, this really doesn't look like a lot of thought was put into it, but maybe that's just me. At least one athlete in these Winter Olympics lives with type 1. Kamilla Kozuback was diagnosed at age 13, and her first question was whether she'd ever be able to snowboard again. That was only 4 years ago. At the time, she told JDRF Canada, quote, "I want to be in the next Olympics. I'm going to keep working hard and training all I can." And she is competing in Japan this week. And finally, the documentary Pay or Die gets some Hollywood star power behind it. Susan Silverman signs on as an executive producer. We had the directors on the show last year to talk about what they describe as a look at the healthcare crisis in America, told through personal stories of those living with type 1 who, because of soaring insulin costs, are living on the edge of survival. Silverman says, "I believe Rachel and Scott might just shame our shameless government enough to move the needle. I'm grateful for the chance to help get eyes on this crucial documentary." Our long format episode this week is with Molly Schreiber, who lives with type 1 and rheumatoid arthritis. Medication for the latter made the decision to get a COVID vaccine complicated, and she shares her story. And next week, we're talking to the people at Siggy Pump, a new tubeless rechargeable pump that got breakthrough device designation last fall. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. And that is in the news for this week. If you like it, please share it. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you back here soon.